It was October of 1883, in the dusty expanse of New Mexico, where the horizon burned gold under the relentless sun, and the wind carried the scent of dust, sweat, and horseflesh. I had come to the town of Redstone on business, or at least that was my excuse. What I found instead was something I would never forget, something that would haunt the rest of my days. Two young Apache sisters were chained together on a makeshift platform. Their eyes, bright and unyielding, met mine for a fleeting second, and I felt a chill creep up my spine. Liyana, the older, stood with a proud defiance that refused to bow, her chin lifted despite the ropes that cut into her wrists. Beside her, Taya, younger by a few years, held herself with quiet dignity, a subtle strength that whispered of resilience even in the face of despair. I had assumed I was walking into a routine market, a simple gathering of ranchers and traders, but the truth was far darker. Human lives were being auctioned like cattle, and the crowd treated them as such, evaluating their muscles, their teeth, their usefulness as though a person's worth could be measured in coins. My name is Silas Hart, and though I had seen the worst of man's cruelty as a cavalry officer, nothing had prepared me for this. I had lost so much before, my wife Miriam to fever that had claimed her too quickly, and the life we had hoped to build together vanished in an instant. Perhaps it was that loss, or perhaps it was a long-suppressed conscience, but as I watched the sisters, something inside me stirred. I would not stand by and do nothing. The auctioneer, a greasy man named Judson Black, called out with an oily grin, strong, young, and fit for any work you might need. Ladies and gentlemen, today's special, 2 Apache sisters. Fine specimens worth every penny. He gestured to Liyana and Taya, and the crowd erupted in murmurs and chuckles, the lewdness of it making my stomach turn. Hands shot up and the bidding began. $50. $75. $100. Each increase felt like a physical blow to my chest. These were human beings, not property, and yet every bid placed them deeper into a world of suffering. The sisters did not plead. They did not cry. They only stood, heads high, daring someone to step forward, daring someone to be more than just another spectator in this tragedy. I found my voice before I knew I had it. 200, I called out, surprising myself with the clarity of my own words. Heads turned. Whispers spread. Who's that man? Hart. Why would he bid? But I did not answer them, did not explain because there was nothing to explain. I was doing what was right and that had to be enough. The bidding escalated, 300, 350, and attention settled over the crowd like a gathering storm. Some men scowled at me, others merely sneered, but I only had eyes for the sisters. Liyana's gaze met mine again, sharp, assessing as though she were questioning me, not for pity but for resolve. Would I act, or would I allow them to be claimed by greed and cruelty? 400. 500. The final call came and the auctioneer's gavel fell. Sold. I pushed through the throng, ignoring the stares and muttered judgments. My hands trembled slightly as I completed the transaction, handing over the coins that felt heavier than lead. In that moment I was not a rancher, not a former officer, not even a man in mourning. I was simply a witness to injustice and I had chosen to act. The sisters were free from the platform, though their wrists remained bound by simple rope. I knelt before them. What are your names? I asked, speaking carefully, using the fragments of Apache I had learned years before. Liyana's eyes narrowed slightly, cautious yet curious. I am Liyana, she said finally, her voice steady, carrying both pride and wariness. This is my sister, Taya. The weight of responsibility settled on me like the desert sun at noon. I had not bought them for work, nor for charity. I had bought them to save them from a world that had already shown them cruelty in its rawest form. And yet, even as I helped them to the wagon, I knew this was only the beginning. Trust would not come easily. Fear would not dissipate overnight. And the whispers of the crowd followed us, a reminder that the world outside the safety of this small wagon was still as cruel as ever. As we began the journey back to my ranch, I watched the sisters closely. Taya kept her gaze fixed on the ground, hands fidgeting, while Liyana scanned the horizon, sharp and alert, as if assessing threats invisible to me. I could see the strength in her posture, the silent promise to protect her sister, and in that promise, I felt the stirrings of hope, fragile, tentative, but there. I could not undo the horrors they had suffered. I could not erase the chains, the jeers, the indignity. But I could offer them something no one had offered before. A chance at freedom, a place to heal, and, if they chose, a family that would fight to protect them. For myself, I felt a flicker of purpose return to a life that had been hollow for too long. For Liyana and Taya, perhaps it was the first moment in many months, maybe years, where they could imagine something better. And in that long dust-filled ride through the desert, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, I silently vowed, I would not fail them. Not now. Not ever. The wagon rolled steadily over the uneven desert trail, dust rising in thin clouds behind the horses' hooves. Liyana and Taya sat side by side, their hands still bound from the auction, eyes sharp and wary. Every movement I made, every glance, seemed to be measured and weighed. I knew their silence wasn't submission. It was vigilance, the kind born of having seen the worst in people. I spoke first, my voice soft, careful. What are your names? I asked, hoping to meet their gaze without startling them. After a long pause, the older one, Liyana, replied, her voice steady but cautious. Liyana. She gestured toward her sister. This is Taya. Taya's eyes flicked to me briefly, her lips pressed together, hesitant. Her posture, even in that small motion, spoke volumes. She was trying to understand whether I was another threat or someone different. Liyana. Taya, I said, nodding. We're going home now. To the ranch. The word home seemed foreign, unfamiliar. I could see it in their eyes, the skepticism, the tiny flicker of hope, and the shadow of all they had lost. For them, the concept of safety was fragile, like a delicate flower in the desert wind, easily crushed. For me it was a promise I intended to keep. The journey was long and quiet. Taya fidgeted with the rope binding her wrists, her small hands twisting and untwisting the fibers as if testing their strength. Liyana, on the other hand, remained still, scanning the horizon as if danger could rise from the rocks themselves. I respected her vigilance. It reminded me that trust was never given lightly, and I had to earn it step by careful step. During a brief pause by a creek, I offered them water, holding the bottles out gently. Taya hesitated, then took it, her fingers brushing mine. A small victory perhaps, but a victory nonetheless. Liyana refused, only watching. I understood, her trust had to be earned, not requested. When we finally reached the ranch, the familiar red cliffs of Redstone Valley rose around us, warm and imposing. The homestead stood like a sentinel, quiet and empty, holding memories of a life I had almost abandoned. Rosa, my housekeeper, stepped out, her eyes widening as she took in the two sisters. What have you done, Silas? She whispered, a mix of concern and disbelief in her voice. They are not property, I said firmly. They are our guests. Free. Safe. I could see her hesitation, the doubt. And yet, slowly she nodded, perhaps trusting me, perhaps simply accepting that the choice had been made. I knelt before the sisters, loosening their ropes. You are free, I said. Not because it is easy, but because it is right. Taya's fingers lingered on the rope for a moment after I removed it, as though she was reluctant to let go of even that last connection to the world that had defined her suffering. Liyana's eyes scanned me carefully, reading my intentions as though trying to decide if this man could be trusted, or if he was just another obstacle they would need to overcome. Days passed in a fragile rhythm. Taya warmed slowly to Rosa, drawn to her kindness, her patience, and the way she treated her like a person, not a possession. Liyana remained distant, but I caught moments when she observed me, the way I tended the horses, repaired fences, or quietly worked without demanding acknowledgement. These small actions were my words, my proof that I could be trusted. Evenings brought reflection. I would sit outside, watching the sun sink behind the cliffs, and wonder how much damage had been done to these girls, how much of the world's cruelty had been etched into their hearts. I thought of my own past, the cavalry campaigns, the lives taken, the battles fought, and wondered if redemption was truly possible for anyone. Rumors began to drift across the valley, whispers of bounty hunters and greedy neighbors who saw opportunity in the sisters' freedom. I knew we weren't safe yet. Danger lurked beyond the cliffs, and I would have to remain vigilant, ready to protect them at any cost. And yet, despite the fear, there were moments of hope. Taya laughed quietly one morning as she worked alongside Rosa in the kitchen, a sound so pure it made me pause. Liyana allowed herself to help with the horses, her touch gentle, careful, as if testing the world again. Every small step, every flicker of trust felt monumental. I learned to speak a little Apache again, asking about their past, their family, their hopes. Sometimes they answered, sometimes they did not. Liyana's silence was often as instructive as her words, a measure of her caution, her strength, her will to survive. By the time night fell and the stars blanketed the desert sky, I understood something deeply. Building trust was not about grand gestures. It was about consistency. It was about proving every day that freedom and safety could coexist, that kindness could exist in a harsh world, and that family could be chosen, even across boundaries of culture and experience. And in the quiet moments, When Taya slept beside Rosa and Liyana remained alert by the porch, I felt the stirrings of hope for all of us. Perhaps redemption was not just for me, the man haunted by his past. Perhaps it was for them too, the sisters who had survived cruelty and captivity, who were learning, slowly, that the world could hold something better. The desert was vast and unforgiving, yet within its expanse, a fragile trust was taking root. And I would guard it with everything I had, because I had glimpsed the possibility of something worth protecting. A family rebuilt from the ashes of loss, cruelty, and fear. The morning sun was barely cresting the red cliffs when a rider appeared on the horizon, dust trailing in his wake. My stomach tightened before I even recognized him. Judson Black, the auctioneer, now flanked by two men whose reputations were as dark as the intentions I already sensed in their eyes. "They say these girls belong to someone else," Black called out as he approached the porch, a smirk twisting his lips. "Your purchase wasn't as permanent as you might think." I didn't flinch. My hands rested lightly on the rifle at my side, my mind already calculating. "They belong here," I said firmly. "With me. They are free. And they will remain so." The sisters appeared at the windows behind me, their eyes sharp, tense, watching every move. Liyana's jaw was tight, Taya's hands clenched at the sill. I could feel their fear, their anticipation. But I also felt their trust. Fragile, yes, but enough to show they believed I would protect them. Black laughed, a low, cruel sound. "Protection? You think a man can stand against the law and men with more bullets than sense?" "I'm not just standing," I replied, stepping forward. "I'm defending what is right. And I won't back down." The tension stretched, the desert air itself seeming to hold its breath. I could see the greed and arrogance in Black's eyes, the certainty that fear alone could bend men to his will. But I had learned patience, I had learned courage, and I had learned that true power lay not in intimidation, but in the resolve to do what was just. Suddenly the sound of hooves thundered against the earth. From the ridge above, Doc Franklin rode down with two federal marshals in tow, their presence commanding attention, authority unassailable. "Judson Black and accomplices," Doc called out, voice steady, "you are under arrest for illegal human trafficking, kidnapping, and running unlicensed auctions." The smug confidence vanished from Black's face, replaced by disbelief, then rage. He looked to his men, but the law was clear, the evidence undeniable. The sisters watched quietly, their eyes wide, their expressions a mixture of relief and astonishment. As the men were led away in chains, I finally allowed myself to breathe. I turned to Liyana and Taya, the weight of the moment pressing gently against my chest. They had been threatened, tested, and yet here they were, safe, unharmed, and beginning to understand the depth of my resolve. Days passed, and slowly the ranch began to feel alive again. Laughter echoed in the halls as Taya prepared meals, humming softly in the kitchen. Liyana moved through the stables with confidence, her hands steady as she guided the horses, her sharp eyes softening in moments when she believed no one was watching. The house, once quiet and empty, pulsed with routine, work, and the subtle rhythms of family. One evening, I sat on the porch watching the sisters tend to chores, their movements precise yet relaxed. "I never thought I could find a purpose again," I whispered to myself. "And yet here it is, in their safety, in their trust, in this fragile but growing family." Liyana approached quietly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You've shown us something, Silas," she said softly. "Not everyone would have done what you did. Not everyone would have risked their life for us." I nodded. "It's what any decent man should do. But it's more than that, it's what any man who has lost everything and wants to give hope again should do." Her gaze softened, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly. Taya, standing beside her, reached for my hand, a gesture small but full of meaning. The bonds of fear and mistrust that had bound them were slowly dissolving, replaced by something stronger, the beginnings of choice, agency, and family. Weeks later, news arrived that reinforced their strength and independence. A lawyer from Washington delivered papers confirming a settlement for Apache lands once lost, compensation granted to their family, a sum that would ensure Taya and Liyana could live on their own terms if they wished. They could have left, built a life anywhere, yet they chose to stay. "We stay," Liyana said, her voice firm and steady. "Not because we must, but because we want to." And in that moment, I realized that family was not born from obligation or ownership or convenience. It was chosen, nurtured, and protected. We were not bound by blood alone, but by trust, loyalty, and love forged in the fire of adversity. The sun set behind the cliffs, casting the desert in a wash of gold and shadow. I stood with Liyana and Taya, the wind carrying the scent of sage and dust. The ranch was ours not just as land but as a home, a sanctuary, a place where hope could grow again. And as I looked at them, I understood something deeply. Sometimes the greatest journeys begin with a single act of courage. One choice to do what is right. One step into the unknown. One moment where mercy outweighs fear, and love is chosen over despair. For Liyana, for Taya, and for myself, that single act had reshaped everything. And from the ashes of cruelty, a new life had begun. A life built on trust, protection, and the quiet but unbreakable bonds of chosen family. The sun set behind the cliffs, painting the desert in gold and shadow. I stood with Liyana and Taya, feeling the weight of everything we had endured, and the quiet joy of what we had built together. The ranch was alive now, not just land but a home, a sanctuary, a place where trust, courage, and love could flourish. Sometimes the greatest journeys begin with a single act of courage. One choice to do what is right. One step into the unknown. And when mercy outweighs fear, even the darkest past can give way to hope. For Liyana, Taya, and myself, that courage had reshaped everything. From cruelty and loss, we had built something stronger. A family by choice, not blood. A home by trust, not possession. A future filled with possibility. If this story of redemption, bravery, and hope moved you, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss more stories from the Wild West and beyond. And we want to hear from you. Have you ever taken a risk to protect someone else, even when it wasn't easy? Share your story in the comments below. Your courage could inspire someone else today.